Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about something that happens in pretty much every company, but often goes completely unnoticed. It's called the iceberg of ignorance, and it's this powerful idea that what leaders see, well, it's just the tiniest fraction of what's really going on.
So, let's just start with a direct question. Think about any organization you've ever been a part of. How much of the real, on-the-ground, day-to-day problems do you think actually get to the people at the very top? Like, what do they really know?
You ready for this? The answer, from some pretty eye-opening research, is just 4%. That's it. Only 4% of the problems that frontline workers deal with every single day are actually known by top management. The other 96%? They haven't vanished, they're just invisible to the people making the big decisions. And this huge gap between what leaders think is happening and what's actually happening, it's perfectly summed up with this image, the corporate iceberg. And just like a real iceberg, you know the most dangerous part isn't what you can see. It's everything hiding just beneath the surface.
See, above the water, in that world that leadership sees, everything looks pretty orderly, right? It's a world of clean reports, positive results, and scheduled committee meetings. But you dive below the surface, where the real work happens, and you find a totally different story. It's a world of hidden mistakes, clunky processes that make no sense, and frankly, a lot of frustration.
So yeah, this whole thing has a name, the iceberg of ignorance. And here's the official definition. It's the phenomenon where 100% of the problems are known by the frontline staff, the people at the bottom. But as that information tries to travel up the ladder, it just evaporates until you're left with that tiny 4% at the very top.
So the big question is, why? Right? How does this happen? Why does this massive information gap exist in the first place? Let's take a look at the hidden forces that are constantly pushing these problems underwater. In this quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head. Problems don't magically solve themselves when you ignore them. They don't disappear. They just sink down, out of sight, where they can quietly grow and become way more dangerous later on.
So why does this happen? Well, it's not just one thing. It's a whole mix of human and cultural issues. For starters, there's fear. No one wants to look incompetent or be the messenger that gets shot. Then, you've got this filtering that happens at every single level, where managers tweak the story to not worry their bosses. On top of that, the company culture itself often rewards keeping quiet, not the uncomfortable courage it takes to flag a real issue. And eventually, if no one ever asks serious questions or does anything with the feedback they get, people just conclude that speaking up is a complete waste of time. Why bother?
Okay, so what? Problems get hidden. What's the big deal? Well, it is a huge deal, because this invisible iceberg has very real, very tangible, and very high costs for the entire organization.
It's like a chain reaction, and it's brutally simple. The cause is that leaders are missing critical context from the people on the ground. The result of that? They make flawed decisions. And the final impact? You get wasted money, wasted time, and failed projects. All because they were trying to solve a problem they didn't really understand.
And that's really the bottom line here. When you don't know what's actually happening in your own organization, you're not managing reality anymore. You're managing an illusion, a cleaned up, simplified story that feels safe, but can lead you straight off a cliff.
All right, I know that sounds pretty grim, but it's not a hopeless situation. The good news is, this iceberg isn't permanent. It can be melted. So let's switch gears and talk about how you can actually do that. Not from the top, but from the bottom up. Here are 4 real, practical steps. First, you have to create actual listening channels, not just a suggestion box that's a black hole. Second, you've got to involve the frontline teams in the decisions that are going to affect their work. I mean, it just makes sense. Third, and this one is a major culture shift, you have to start valuing the person who finds the problem, not the person who hides it. And finally, you have to connect the dots between the data on your spreadsheets and the reality on the ground by actually talking to people.
You know, if you wanted to boil all that strategy down into a super simple, memorable mantra, this is it. Go down into the organization more often. When you get there, ask better questions, not just yes or no. And maybe the most important part, actually listen to the answers you get. It's a whole leadership philosophy in just 7 words. And that brings us back to the iceberg one last time with this final, really powerful insight. You can't just command the iceberg to melt from your office at the top. It doesn't work that way.
Real, lasting change only happens when you warm the entire foundation of the organization, when you build a culture of trust and safety from the bottom up.
So we'll leave you with this question to take with you. Think about your own workplace. Are the real, messy, complicated problems actually known and talked about? Or are you only hearing about the sanitized ones that fit neatly on a PowerPoint slide? The answer to that tells you everything you need to know about the size of your iceberg. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.